So, hi, I'm Joy Vernon. I'm the organizer for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup. And today we are looking at the decanic imagery of Taurus and the related tarot cards, which are the 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is John Allen, and I'm the organizer of Denver Tarot Meetup, along with Denver Tarot Geeks, which is the more esoteric branch of our tarot groups here in Denver. And I've been working uh, with Joy for quite a number of years on these little outings, these series that we do. Got really, just looking at really in depth in some of these more esoteric ideas that connected with tarot. And today, of course, is no exception. We've got um, the decanic imagery. Of course, we're going to be looking at a series. I'm sure some of you probably have been to this before, so you know what to expect. However, maybe for the video's purposes, we'll be looking at a series of magical images throughout the centuries by various authors and comparing at least one of them to directly to each of the cards and seeing what we can glean from that.
Awesome. Let's get going. If you had any thoughts on it, or even just like your regular thoughts on 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles.
But I know with the 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles and being a Taurus, I'm definitely interested because the 5, 6, and 7 are kind of like this weird kind of hard work, redemption, forgiveness arc to me in tarot. And so I'm definitely interested to see how that kind of looks through that other lens that I'm just beginning to touch on.
Okay, good, good. I like that. Hard work, redemption. What did you say?
Um,
Renewal?
with renewal or forgiveness, there's this sort of like not necessarily external, but there's this sort of like internal sort of hard work and redemption arc to me and that coin set. So I'm definitely interested to see if my own personal bias translates into the astrology realm, which, as I said, I'm still naive and innocent on.
No, I love when people watch for those arcs in a set of cards, and I'm always interested to hear what people come up with. And I like that. I think that's a good one. Yeah, we'll see if how that matches our decanic images. That's gonna be good.
I was just going to say that in regards to like the 5, 6, and 7s of Pentacles, it's interesting because normally I always kind of look at the triad of 4, 5, and 6, and I find that to be, the to me to be the kind of mini arc journey of it. So it is interesting to see like 2/3 of one and 1/3 of the other. But because instead of like the holding on too tightly and because you're afraid of you losing it, and then actually you do lose it, and then you can get the generosity back. This would be the having lost it, getting the generosity, and then starting to build something new. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing what else has to happen.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good way. I mean, the 4, 5, and 6 make a really good arc too, for sure. Um, yeah, I like that. It's like you get in the 6, like you start out as the 5 without anything, and then in the 6 you get like a grant or a business loan or some kind of yeah, some kind of investment, and then yeah, you can take that and then build something. That's a good way of looking at it. I don't know if I've ever like quite put it back together that way, but like just like helping all of those organizations that help small business people get started. It's like I don't have anything. I'm broke. I want to start a farm. Will you help me? Here's my proposal. It's like, yes, you get the money. Your proposal's great. And then he's got a farm and it's like, yay. So, that's pretty cool. Okay. So I think that's a good place. I think that's a good thing to kind of start out with.
So I guess we launch right into our slides. So y'all should be seeing a big old slide here with our first decan of Taurus, which is going to be is ruled by Mercury. It's esoterically known as the Lord of Material Trouble, tying in with that initial image of the lepers and the unfortunate people outside the church. And it's a decan that, I mean, it continues the work that was completed with Aries. Last month we tackled Aries, and Aries was concentrated on building its own world and establishing what a person's firm identity. And here with Taurus, it's the goal here is to civilize and cultivate that world and to understand how to create growth and achieve abundance with the world that we've created. I think, I've mentioned before, we were talking about this before we started here, and that one of the things that Austin Coppock writes about in his book, at least in terms of this particular decan, is that it provides not necessarily, it doesn't foretell loss and poverty, rather than it provides a vision of loss and poverty that one compels one to do the necessary labor that is involved with this civilization and cultivation. And it's also a decan that provides visions of abundance. And part of the work of the decan is to balance that work and pleasure, having that life work balance that we all like to maintain. And so we're going to look at the images now. The images are, of course, AI generated, and we give you an opportunity to read the description first and envision it in your mind before we show you that image. And it's also, I think in this case, probably your imagination will come in good handy, because AI does have its limitations. For one thing, it doesn't allow nudity, and there's a lot of images that call for that in these traditions. But that's verboten in the AI world, at least, for the ones that are more reliable AIs. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with our first image, which is from Abraham Ibn Ezra. And he describes a woman with hair who has a son and who wears clothes partly burnt. And we have our image. Our next image is from the Picatrix. Is a woman with curly hair having a single child who is dressed in clothes like unto fire, and she herself is dressed in similar clothes. It goes on to say, then this is the face of plowing and working the earth, of sciences, geometry, of sowing seed and making things. Now, thirdly, we have Cornelius Agrippa. He describes a naked man, an archer, harvester, or husbandman, and goeth forth to sow, plow, build people, and divide the earth according to the rules of geometry. Our next image is from Giordano Bruno from the 16th century. Someone naked, plowing, wearing a hat of woven straw, of dark complexion, followed by a rustic or woman sowing seed. Next image is from Aleister Crowley, a woman with long, beautiful hair, clad in flame-colored robes. And finally, we have Austin Coppock, who describes simply the plow. Now we can consider all 6 images together, along with our usual scrying exercise, where we focus on that blank space in the middle and allow ourselves to envision an image influenced by these 6 images here, although we put our own imaginations at work. And we'll give you a few moments to do that. And here we are again.
I feel like this one's kind of complicated. I was starting to get images from alchemy because there's the geometry one of the guy doing kind of a triangle, square, and circle, or some kind of combination like that. He's like painting it on the wall, or I forget exactly what the image it was. And then there's a series of alchemy images of sewing coins into the earth. And think I think the geometry one in that sequence was associated with the stage of separation in the planet Mars, but I'm not positive. But I don't remember what the sewing coins was. John, you don't happen to remember those, do you?
That was a while ago, and a lot of those details do escape me.
Yeah.
I do remember the image that you're talking about the geometry. I believe that was the squaring of the circle or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I seem to have come across something somewhere in some documentary or YouTube video, or I don't remember, but something about how geometry plays a role in agriculture, in that they had to use geometry to figure out how much land they owned and what the boundaries of their land were. Because such a odd combination of images. I mean, one of the Decans described it kind of all in one sentence. It's like plowing and sowing and building and peopling the earth and geometry. It was just like all there. Like, yep. Monica, what have you got?
I don't know. I see a lot in words more than I do images. And it was really interesting to me how I think of Mercury as air because of the communication and that sort of thing. Yet here you've got all these images of the earth and fire battling one another. The
Yeah.
picture kind of gave me an Empress vibe when I was hearing it and imagining it on my own. But it's definitely more of a kind of I don't want to say devastated because the image of the people themselves, the mother and child, is very like love filled and optimistic, but around them, so it's interesting to see how AI took that vibe that I was feeling and went completely opposite. But I don't know, I thought that the fighting or between the fire and the earth elements, while this is like ruled by air, was an interesting piece.
Yeah, I like that. Definitely some good Empress vibes without a doubt. And in the triplicity order of the rulerships, the triplicity rulerships, we use the Chaldean. Venus would rule this decan. And then the second decan would be Mercury, and the third decan would be Saturn. Which that decan is the same in both systems, but it is interesting to think about that triplicity one because, I mean, the sign of Taurus is ruled by Venus, and then the first decan in the triplicity order would be ruled by Venus, and we do have an abundance of women in the images, which we don't usually get. And when we do, a lot of times there's a Venus reference going on. And of course, the Empress is Venus. I was telling John before we started that I don't necessarily agree with Austin's interpretation on the one hand, but John felt like it was pretty. I mean, the Crowley keyword is worry, and Austin just went with a pretty straightforward interpretation, which is definitely valid of, it's worry in this decan that motivates us. And that's what John said, introducing the decan, that motivates us to do the work so that we can achieve and have success. And certainly the fire imagery would bring about some worry, I would think. Because that's extremely threatening.
I've kind of almost read the fire as being a symbol of passion. And it's like, they're clothed in their apparel is supposed to be resembling fire. So it's what they dress themselves with. The partially burnt ones in Ezra's were like almost like it just kind of almost suggested to me just inflaming oneself with the passion that comes with, I think, um, wanting that abundance that comes with the decan, and then with the Mercury aspect of it, I can see it, tying in with these images of the actions in the field, where you're taking that passion and allowing it to motivate you, as well as saying in the back of your head, if I don't do this, things will fail. Monica, you have something?
Yeah, well, and I think too, fire with earth is very much a clean slate kind of piece as well. When like fire scorches the earth and leaves it with a new ability to create and grow something fresh.
Mm.
And
And
that's
aren't there some seeds that need fire to germinate, some things like that? Yeah, that makes sense.
Like the solar fire that warms the earth and allows for that germination to take place.
Well, yeah, that would be a parallel to that as well. What else were you going to say, Monica?
I was just thinking in my head, like when I'm looking at the images, it's hard for me to separate the fire and the earth elements when I'm looking at them all together. And so that's just where my brain went, was thinking of that sort of, burning off of land to plant and grow something new.
Yeah.
All right. Today, or this month, we're going to be looking at Austin Coppock's images and comparing them to the cards. So that will be here. The image of the plow. And we'll pair that with this the Five of Pentacles.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Actually, well, I think I needed a little more time to compose this thought, I think. So go ahead and say what you were thinking.
Well, I've worked with this quite a bit before. At least with the Five of Pentacles as ruled by Mercury. Trying to add the plow into it, I do find a little bit challenging. So I wanted to just kind of start with some basic things, because Mercury rules travel and is considered fast moving, and it rules communication, as somebody said earlier. It also rules commerce, which, combined with Taurus, it seems like we might shift towards the commerce part of Mercury. Mercury is considered a thief and a trickster. In fact, he stole Apollo's herd of cattle, and fooled Apollo by driving the herd backwards so that it looked like they were going one direction when they were actually going by the footprints, when they were actually going the other direction. And so, but Mercury tends to get away with it pretty much every time. And he doesn't seem like he's a real good fit for this image in some ways. But on the other hand, Taurus is it's so solid. I mean, just when you think of that bull or that ox and how big and immovable it is, although they call oxen movable wealth, as opposed to just the land itself or a building or something. But but it's so big and solid and strong, and Taurus itself as fixed earth just seems really immovable to me. And so when I think of Mercury hitting Taurus, it just feels like he's zipping along and crashes into Taurus and is just like, oh my God, I feel so dragged down and I feel like I can't move at my normal pace. And, and I want to, I just wanted to flit through and be on to Gemini where I like, and now I'm kind of stuck here. And so I think that to me is a little bit of the frustration that I see in the Five of Pentacles, maybe, just in terms of this is not what I was planning. I'm normally I'm not like this, but I'm just really bogged down right now and can't seem to get out of this this stuckness. And then I guess when I try to add the plow in, I mean, again, Mercury as I think of Mercury as commerce being more taking the, more like farmer's market or something like that. But of course, that would be the result. I don't necessarily, I mean, Taurus definitely has a very, very strong growth, green, uh, agricultural connotation to me. But I mean, Mercury would be the one that would come up with the plan, and this is how we need to handle our land, and we can't just hunt and gather. Let's like think this through and put together a plan. I mean, he also rules Virgo. So there could be some connection there. Perhaps let's do some plowing and make this a little more structured so that we get bigger crops and more output and enough extra. I mean, that would be, enough extra to sell, not just make enough for ourselves, but make enough to sell. Somebody says there are elements of servitude and indentured situations with the plow as well. Yeah, both with the feudal systems and with old actual manual plowing. Yeah, and that comes up in Decan 3. Decan 3 has one of the keywords is slavery, among a variety of others. But I think there's a little crossover between the first Decan and the third Decan. And Emmy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that with the imagery of the plow, and you think about like the trickster element of Mercury compared to the Taurus and Earth and abundance, and the stolidity of Taurus, like the stubbornness, and I'm going to do it this way and only this way. You almost can imagine kind of like a Murphy's Law situation where the trickster of Mercury is like, well, I'm gonna rain some troubles on you, and you're not going to be able to be as flexible and adaptable to those troubles because you're so stolid and hard to move, and therefore that can end in the deprivation that you see in the Rider Waite Smith deck.
Yeah, that I like that. And I think going back, both both these points are things I want to stay with a little bit. Just that idea of the servitude and indentured and that whole feudal systems when, I mean, I just know it from movies and whatnot, but the king sends his tax officer around to everybody's farm and they have to give them like 90% of what they made or something like that. Back in those days, there wasn't the farmer's market. There was just the king coming and taking away all your hard-earned efforts. So that he can live high on the hog, and you're just stuck. So yeah, there's that does kind of that works actually really nicely with the Five of Pentacles. A lot of people like to contrast that wealth of the church against the poverty of those people. I don't see it that way. I see those people as knowing that they can get a, soup dinner and a cot for the night in the church, and that's why they're going there. But I definitely understand the other way, of course, of thinking about it makes sense to me too. Um, and so I do like that idea of the ideas with the feudal system were not fair. And there was quite a lot of work that didn't reap any reward, that didn't reap uh a fair and equitable reward. It's interesting to think about it like this. Yeah, John.
Maybe too, and like just maybe putting it into a more contemporary context where we're not, at least, slavery is not as much of an issue as it was back in the day. Uh, it's the more making in the hands of, it's the laborer who is like pretty much at the bedrock or the base of that hierarchy, which provides all, the sustenance for all of that above. And I guess with the mercurial element, there is again, you're talking about, there's that dual aspect of Mercury. On the one hand, he does lord over commerce and the profiteering that comes with it, but also then the trickster aspect of it is like with farming, you can't always expect the same outcome every year, or things can go wrong. Again, that also ties in with that final decan too, where there's a more of a, I mean, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but there's a kind of like that reckoning with those forces that you don't have control over, which environmental factors. So you're kind of at the mercy of that.
Yeah, this puts us together in a really interesting way for me. Somebody says mercurial troubles indicates that there is change or an end. Yeah, so maybe hunger until the crops come in. Yeah, definitely. Um,
You're starting with at a base level with nothing to start with, and then the goal is to make something that can provide that profit.
Yeah, I was feeling like when I was first just looking at the 6 images and the descriptions and all of that, I was really thinking of going off from this Aries kind of independence and learning to claim your space and into this Taurian needing to develop that space and uh all of those words, plow and sow and build and people the earth and all of that kind of stuff. Really claim your place in society, claim your possessions. I mean, Taurus's mantra is I have. Um, I think I think there can be a certain amount of positivity to that. Um, and there's definitely, it was considered in certain time periods, it was the kind of dominating nature, overcoming nature, and bending nature to your will type of thing was considered a positive. I don't think that's considered a positive anymore by any, well, maybe some people. But but that seems to be a little bit of the energy that we're feeling in this decan. And in the right time and place, it certainly has a lot of uh there's certainly always an appropriate, like, taking care of yourself, living off the land. That's always a nice experience. The card image for me throws it off and twists it and does get it more into kind of that feudal system and other inequities.
Okay. Um, would this be a good opportunity to move on to the second decan?
Yeah, I think so,
Unless
unless
there's
anybody has anything else they want to throw out. I'm not, oh yeah, okay, okay, good. I'm not sure that we got everything we can out of this one, but I think we spent some good time on it. And a lot of times I think my experience has been that when we move on, it puts the previous ones in better perspective. And so I learn more about this one when I go to the next one.
okay. So we'll go on to our next decan. So the second decan here is ruled by the moon, esoterically known as Lord of Material Success. And this decan marks the point of mid-spring or Beltane, which is celebrating the procreative union of sun and earth. After the seeds have been sown in the first decan, this is where the seeds start to take root and sprout. And with once planted, that consistency and dedication is needed to maintain that successful growth. So it's a constant effort being applied here. Again, this is a fixed decan in a fixed sign, so you have that double fixed quality of maintenance and sustainability. It's the results of virtue practiced over time. That virtue being, the one that allows you to cultivate and work the land, not just in terms of, the land in a literal sense, but also, our personal land, ourselves, how we cultivate our minds and our lives. And I think we mentioned in the previous decade about that element of passion with the fire, which is necessary here, but in terms of being tempered with ordered effort and discipline. So you have motivation, but also the application. So we'll look at our imagery that it describes this here. Again, too, our descriptions some of these descriptions do go on quite a bit, and I only have like a certain amount of space to put type here. So I will read this. A man who resembles a ram in his face and his body, who has a wife that resembles an ox. His fingers are like goat's hooves, and that man is very hot and gluttonous, and does not give his soul any rest. He builds the land and drives the oxen to plow and sow. Our next image is again from the Picatrix. Man like the figure of a camel, and having on his fingers are hooves like those of cows, and he is covered completely with a torn linen sheet. He desires to work the land, to sow, and to make things. And this is a face of nobility, power, and of rewarding the people. And then we have Agrippa's image, a naked man holding in his hand a key. It giveth power, nobility, and dominion over people. and Bruno's image. Someone naked, wearing a crown and wielding a club or bearing keys, with a golden girdle over the shoulder and carrying a scepter in the left hand. I'm going to have to apologize for a goof here. This actually, in the image, the scepter is being held in the right hand. And should have flipped that one. Crowley's image, a man of like figure to the ascendant, with cloven hooves like an ox. And last, the Coppock's image, a linga yoni. And if you're not familiar with what a linga yoni is, it is a traditional Hindu symbol of combined masculine and feminine principles. The image that was for our hero image for the event is a linga yoni. And we'll break out to our 6 images in total and do our scrying again. We can return now.
Well, I'll jump in because it reminded me of Empedocles and his love and strife. And when love dominates in Empedocles kind of conception, everything is completely unified and one. And so there can't be any change. Um, and then he visualizes this cycle where there's where strife starts getting added in with love, and on one side, when love and strife are kind of balanced, people grow out of furrows in the earth or something like that, or shoots. There are shoots of people, I think was the phrase. And then as you go down, he conceptualizes this as a circle. When you go down to the bottom, there's the whirl, which is strife. So love was everything unified, and strife, when strife dominates, there's the whirl, which is this like whirlwind, or centrifuge thing that pushes everything out and apart, and there can be no connection. But then as you go up the other side of that circle, from strife up towards love, one of the things that happens when there's kind of too love is a little bit too much in the mix is that you get these human animal hybrids, because too many things are combining, things that shouldn't be combined. And so that reminds me of that. And the other thing that kind of goes along with that, I think ties in a little bit more with the moon. And the moon represents, or is corresponds to the instinctive drives, the autonomic function, reproduction. And these are ideas that go back again to throughout time, certainly, but I came across them in some Greek philosophy, I think. But and so there's the lunar, that qualities that the moon rules are often associated with animalistic qualities, like just survival qualities, and again, animal instinct, reproductive urges, and things like that. And I think with the Linga Yoni image, Austin was also conjuring up the fact that it's Beltane, and the maypole symbolism and some of that. I think it's also interesting, though, that in this deck, and we get those keys, which are typically found on the Hierophant card, which is Taurus in the Major Arcana, following the Golden Dawn assignments based on the Tree of Life. So this Decan, I gotta say, as weird as it was, made a certain amount of sense to me.
I think too, with the lunar aspect of it, I think I think Austin also mentions in his chapter. I think he talks about it's the association with the hora, the hours, and that's was responsible for uh, the regularity of the cycles of the seasons, and how everything kind of goes in its own patterns. I think probably also, I sometimes see the moon too as a really strong connection with nature, with natural order.
Yeah, and the moon has a certain motherly quality, which we see in its ruling of the sign of Cancer, but also the moon was the moon is exalted in Taurus, and its exaltation degree is the 3rd degree, which is in the first decan that we already saw, but we did see some mothers with children in there, and there was a little bit of a reference in that decan to I thought to reproduction, not as much as in this with the more, at least with Austin's more on the nose linga yoni symbolism. Um, but yeah, I mean so the moon is significant in the previous decan as well as this one. Somebody says here there was still a bit of contrast with these as well, though. One rewarding people, one having power over it. Yeah. The camel image versus the more Baphomet looking ones. Yeah, the Linga and Yoni. Yeah, there was definitely the one rewarding people, one having power over it. Yeah, those were pretty similar. But the one rewarding people, of course, ties in really strongly to the Six of Pentacles image. Um, I think these ideas they're so confusing when we have to parse this through time and in our own current sense of right and wrong and our own life and how we live our life and the things that are important to us and not important to us. Um and I think a lot of the things that I'm seeing um in this sign are include like these ideas of how to use your power, not not in a, and I mean, the word dominion came up, which always I think is a trigger for people. Um, and leads people too quickly to a synonym of domination, which isn't, I know that comes up if you look it up in the dictionary, but that's not quite how I see dominion. Dominion is just the where you have power, and what is your power, and where can you express your power. And I think that's coming up a lot in these. It's like especially if we take this sequence from Aries, from that kind of birth and individuality, and like I said, moving into Taurus, which is having possessions and having a place, and then your own strength as an oxen or a bull. Like, how can you use your strength? How can you use your power? And what can you do with it? And yeah, and their ideas, do you share? Do you give it all away so you don't have anything left and then you're impoverished? Or did somebody take it all from you even though you did the hard work? Or, do you grow enough to take it to market and sell? All of these things of how you use your power and your uh and strength, how you use your power and strength.
I had a kind of a tangential thought, but I'm not sure how relevant it is. But just the idea of, I was like, making that distinction between the bull and the ox. And that is, that the oxen is basically a castrated bull who, and in that particular emasculation is, intended to make the beast more docile and more obedient,
Mhm.
and thus more more suitable for actually, carrying out the work.
That's really interesting, especially with Austin's choice.
But it's kind of a drastic look, like a way of looking at that combination of masculine and feminine. But And also too, the fact that, um, to fit Taurus is a feminine sign. So there's going to be a lot of, that type of energy going on,
Right.
more
Yeah.
so than a masculine.
Well, and I think I mean just I'm not trying to perpetuate stereotypes, but I'm going to do it anyway, I guess. Hopefully, hopefully not for the purpose of perpetuating a stereotype, but for the idea of bringing up a discussion around it. But yeah, there's a real strong sense that the feminine energy is one of staying in one place and of building a home and of staying put, and the masculine energy is one of exploration. And I'll say philosophically feminine and philosophically masculine, just like we say philosophical salt and philosophical Mercury when we're talking about alchemy. But the philosophical masculine is off exploring and hunting and moving outward and moving onward and not staying put. Um, and this is a sign of staying put. I mean, Taurus is that fixed earth and is not very changeable. And once you get into the agriculture and plowing the earth, you've got to stay and see it through. So yeah, that's a really interesting connection, John, to think about that way. Archetype is the friendly word for stereotype. I love it. Okay. The archetypal masculine. Okay, good. I was trying to find the vocabulary that lets me get away with my things that I think.
That's the one that does it. Yeah, that's a good word. Okay. Is there any other comments, questions before we go on to our third decan? Or actually, we still have yet to go into our card for
Yeah.
this. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll bring up Austin's Linga Yoni. And now also our Six of Pentacles. I
And it's,
immediately,
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I immediately get that, connection of masculine and feminine balance here with, both of these. I mean, we have the more symbolic version of the Linga Yoni, and you also have the rich man here distributing alms to the poor. Um, Psychologically speaking, too, the sixes do tend to be some of the most balanced cards of the suits, where they have the midpoint here between, the divine and the material, and getting both of those sentiments balanced and in equal contributions to one another. And you have that also with that lunar influence with that ruled by the moon. You get that flux and flow of that energy, where it's there sometimes, and there's a time for it to be there, there's a time for it to go elsewhere.
I get the balance and the contrast that with the Ling and Yoni, but the thing that's sticking out to me most, and it did from the moment Joyce said it, but was the how you use your strength from the conversation on the previous slides, and how that's shown. Because I always look at this card and wonder, why are those people so eager for that present? Is it the power? Is it the need? What is it that's creating that just, well, the eagerness that you see, especially in more contemporary versions of this card? But so I do see the Linga Yoni and the balance and contrast there, but it's that question of how you use your strength carried over that really sticks out.
I like that.
Oftentimes, whenever I pull this card too, I have to ask myself, am I the the rich man or the beggar in this, or maybe I'm both.
The thing that really strikes me is just when you think about like worship in Hinduism, the making an offering to the gods and also getting prasad, after you have had, done your worship. And so, in a way, it's both giving and receiving, as in this card, as well as, if that is part of your dharma, is to then extend, the blessings that you have in this lifetime to the people who most need it, then that would be put you in the position of the person who's giving, and or if your karma is such that you were born into a lower status in this lifetime, then you have to be receiving it. So that was what struck me. I thought was really interesting that this time it's bringing in Hinduism to the tarot, which we've often seen, not necessarily seen those elements.
Yeah, really nice points. Yeah, I think there's something too to just the idea of because if I understand it correctly, I don't think Hinduism is their concept of reincarnation is not necessarily like, a one-way evolution towards, perpetual nirvana and Buddhahood, but it's always a cycle. And you can go through these different incarnations and show up, as at any level at any time. And when you do conceive of life that way, that definitely will bring out a lot more desire to help other people. Um, Again, if I'm understanding this correctly, that, this could be me someday, and so I'm gonna, what would I want if I was that person? I'd want some help. I'd want a leg up, um, as opposed to more of the American idea that, once maybe you have hard times, but once you get out of it, you'll never go back to it. And it's always onward and upward.
It reminds me of was it Gandhi's comment when he was asked what he thought about Western civilization? He said he thought it was a good idea. So I guess that's a cue to move on. Or
I think maybe, yeah.
we'll take a look at the third one now. On our third decan, ruled by Saturn, Lord of Success Unfulfilled. And with Saturn's rulership, it can bring hardship, but it can also bring structure and discipline to one's efforts, along with some necessity and profit. And I think, as mentioned earlier, with this decan, it's at least as Coppock describes it, it is the reckoning with the unseen factors outside our personal effort, where we have in the which was more described in the first decan. And with those hardships comes, the lessons of learning from mistakes and turns of fortunes, as well as learning the remedies to fix those. And I think, along with that aspect of it being, a decan or being from a sign that is fixed, it is ultimately teaches us how to preserve what we've been able to produce. So, anything else you want to say about this, Joy, or?
No, I mean, the thing that popped into my mind when you said that is I thought for some reason I thought you were going to mention, I thought you were on the verge of mentioning that this is the mutable decan. And I don't think you went that way. I think you said something different, but I was like, wait, the mutable decan of Taurus is ruled by Saturn. So we've got our fixed earth Taurus, and then we've got that slow, heavy, and changeable Saturn ruling it. But it's supposed to be mutable and changeable. This decan is not, that's, I can already see just like an unresolvable dilemma here.
Right. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because Saturn is a very traditional planet, or at least, likes to preserve those old and tried and tested um, ways and ideas, which, definitely, I mean, it's a noble thing to want to hold on to something that definitely works. And I think, Taurans are pretty good at that. Once they find um, that thing that just clicks, they just will stick with it till the end until
Yeah.
they get another idea. And now let's see, let's go ahead and look at the images again. So again, this is a rather lengthy description from Ibn Ezra, which uh, is cut short on the text, but we'll read it out. It's a man whose feet are white, and so are his teeth, which are so long that they can be seen outside his lips. His complexion is reddish, and so is his hair, and his body resembles that of an elephant and a lion. And he is not unreasonable, or he is not reasonable, and his thoughts are toward evil, and he is sitting propped up. A horse and a dog and a small calf. And my image is particularly, it's rudimentary here. But at least we got the white feet, or at least just white sneakers. Next, we have in the Picatrix a similar image, a man of ruddy coloring with large white teeth appearing outside his mouth and a body like an elephant whose legs are long. And there ascends with him one horse, one dog, and one calf. Agrippa describes in the third face, ascendeth the man, in whose hand is a serpent and a dart, and is the image of necessity and profit, and also of misery and slavery. Bruno describes another similar image to Agrippa's. In the third face is a man holding a serpent in his left hand, and in his right hand a spear or an arrow. Before him is a fire pot and a large jar of water. Slowly comes back to a swarthy man with white lashes, his body elephantine and with long legs, with him a horse, a stag, and a calf. Lastly, Austin Coppock, who describes the string of prayer beads. Now we'll once again, meditate on our scrying with the 6 images in our spot here. Okay, I think we're good. Hmm. I was half looking at MM Maline's card while we were doing this, and I noticed that she also incorporates the prayer beads. There's a series of images of skeletons surrounding Crowley's image. They're all in gestures of prayer with the hands clasped. I can probably just hold it up if you can see. It's hard to see, but in that sphere above the man's head is where the horse, the stag, and the calf are. And he's sharpening a scythe, a symbol of Saturn.
Well, I was having trouble remembering for a second. I was like, why did Austin pick the prayer beads? And I remembered it was because the deity, according to the 36 heirs of the zodiac, was the litai, which are prayers. And so that makes pretty good sense. He contrasted it with another goddess that
Oh,
represents chaos.
the Ate, I think was the name,
Yeah.
which translates to ruin or folly.
Both do seem to be relevant to the Deccan. I was most struck with the references to elephants and the Hierophant's throne in the Crowley deck that is like a distorted elephant. Am I remembering that correctly, John?
That there is I think there's two images of elephants in there that are comprising his throne, as well as a full-on bull as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember there's a lot of complicated symbolism in that card.
There is. Well, his take on the Hierophant is really different. His Hierophant is more of like he describes it as a cenotaph. Like it's a monument to a a long gone figure, which he says, okay, his philosophy was basically everyone has access to this spiritual development, and that the Hierophant is not necessarily as necessary in that new order of things. But
What does cenotaph mean again?
it's like a monument to it's kind of like a tomb, but with for a figure or a body that isn't there.
Interesting. Because the other thing that came to mind for me, I don't know if this is related or not, but the idea that elephants have a lot of memory, because I was working with the mutable quality of this Deccan, and I was thinking with the that real fixed Taurus and fixed and the heaviness of Saturn, it was like in the elephant imagery, I'm like, well, I guess one transitional thing is people that carry memories. And they can remember the past and carry that, transition that into the future, but they still have to have like this sense of tradition and ongoing value and importance of things past. And that kind of thing. And so this idea of a cenotaph of something that's not there, an image of something that's not there anymore, I'm like, huh, that kind of fits with, I'm still not sure I understand it, but it kind of fits, I think.
Maybe it's also good, but at this point we can bring up what you were talking about, I think previously. I think it was, it made for a better match, or at least in what you were thinking, that it would made for a better match if the cards for 5 and the 7 were swapped in terms of, the decanic ideas.
Yeah, and this particular I think the Picatrix description, which I pulled up here on the side, I've got This is a face of sloth, poverty, misery, and dread. And that seems to match the Five of Pentacles really well. Whereas the plow imagery and the idea of sowing and growing and planting matches the Seven of Pentacles well with its vines and everything. So and and John made a, we were talking about this before we started, and John made just a really good argument that I have to say I agree with 100%, which is, it's easy to, well, he didn't say this. This is my my assessment of my own thing that I was trying to do. It's easy to just say, they got it wrong and they swapped those two by accident. And it's much more of a challenge to really like take it as it is and work with it as written and as assigned and see what you get out of it, because that can really open up a lot of potential and a lot of insight. But yeah, I do think it's curious that this energy to me does fit the Five of Pentacles image better than the Seven of Pentacles. Yeah, Monica.
Um, Not to diminish that thought at all, but to me, that feels very contemporary Western mentality. Very much that Ben Franklin Protestant work ethic, early to bed, early to rise. Whereas in the Five of Pentacles, there's poverty, there's potential leprosy, depending on who you're looking at for what the symbols mean. But who's to say they aren't working? Who's to say they haven't been cleaning all day? Who's to say they didn't scrub the inside of that church, which they got kicked out of? And I think that there's contemporary Western mentality to assume that wealth is virtue and poverty is a lack of motivation or a lack of, you know, hard work or integrity, when sometimes it's just that life throws some stuff at you and kicks you in the teeth. Um, and so I think it's dangerous to make that swap assumption. But again, not to diminish it, I totally get it. But there's also that other element.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I kind of spoke for you to, and then put it into my own words, John, but do you have anything else you want to add into that?
Well, I mean, just probably just I'll repeat what I was saying before, more or less. I kind of came from the perspective of, well, this is what it is, and I kind of take it at face value at some level. Um, and my sometimes my mode, this is like my mode of thinking on things is just kind of saying, okay, well, I'm just gonna just look at this and penetrate it as far as it can get it, see if there is some kind of reasoning behind the imagery. I don't always come up with answers, but again, too, it's like uh, I'm a Capricorn ruled by Saturn. Saturn is pretty prominent in my chart as far as an ascendant, so it does have an effect on how I guess my own personal stubbornness in that case. It's like, okay, yep, it's it. Yeah, I'm just going to take it here as it is. But and plus also, that respect for authority or that complicated relationship with authority that Saturn can give you. It can give you respect for authority, but also a little bit of a mistrust of it. And seeing as we have Saturn in this decan too, I think it's kind of maybe a little relevant to point in that direction. I think here it's like, with that maybe as a stepping off point from the second decan where we had that balance and we had that the authority and or at least the giving and the taking. And here I think it's like, well, I have it comes into a realization that you do have the ability to, or at least, the potential to become the person who distributes the alms rather than the person who's, reliant upon them.
Yeah, Monica.
Well, and I wondered too how much the kind of farcical way that AI made these men with elephant bodies plays into how we're seeing this, because yeah, I can kind of imagine the written descriptions not being so cartoon villainy. And I wonder too how much that's playing into what I'm thinking about how I'm looking at this decan.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said that elephantine meant simply fat. To me, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, that's getting, another limitation of the technology. And yeah, I agree. Some of these images, this one was this one was a tough one to do just because a lot of the descriptions were complex. And if you focused on one element, perhaps you might have gotten it a little better. But if you're trying to get all the elements together at once, it just tends to go for a bit above a lowest common denominator factor.
One of the things I noticed was, I think, particularly in the second one, we've got the dog, the calf, and the horse. And those were all three uh like originally wild animals that have been tamed. The stag, I'm not sure if that is a tamed, like a tame animal, or like, I don't know the right word for it in any culture, but the elephant even can be, because that can be like a beast of burden um along the lines with our bull or our ox. It reminded me of some of the things we were talking about earlier with Taurus, and kind of like um taking wild things, which was Aries, and taming them and as an expression of Taurus. So that made some pretty good sense to me. Oh, somebody says here, I think it definitely aids. Oh, sorry.
I was just thinking about what Coppock was talking about it in his book and how he addresses the uncertainty factor of the things that are going on beyond one's control and one's efforts, and that the animals represent or at least are the things that he may have to rely upon in case his crops fail in order to to keep his sustaining themselves. They would have to go out and hunt the stag. They would might have to kill the calf or whatever.
Yeah.
And the horse is definitely another symbol of that domesticated creature that we've harnessed to do the work of the plowing and the sowing and all that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in the stag is interesting to me, because it's like once you become a farmer and you've got like all your cattle out there and you want dinner, you don't have to go hunting anything. You just like go grab one and bring it in and slaughter it and whatever. I don't I'm a vegetarian. I don't know how these things work. Um, but yeah, the stag, you do have to hunt, and hunt is more of the Aries, Mars ruled warrior type of energy, whereas the agriculture and the husbandry and raising um animals that way is does kind of fit to me, that Taurian energy. It makes good sense to me. And over in the comments we have, I think it definitely aids the swapped decan theory, though. And she says that that was about the cartoony nature of this. So that's just some more insights there.
I think it also kind of reminds me too of, I guess, the lunar part of it, the second decan, maybe also spilling over a little bit in that I kind of, you see, but well, you think darts and the game darts, but what could also this dart could be used for is hunting. And lunary speaking, if that's a word, but it just brought to mind, Diana, who was goddess of the moon, but also goddess of the hunt.
Mm, yeah. And I know, I mean, this snake symbol of renewal and transformation is coming to mind. The idea of the snake that becomes the staff, or the staff, Moses's staff that became a snake. Some of those things are kind of going through my mind with both a snake and a spear. Although I think dart and arrow were other words that were brought up. So I'm not, again, I don't have any, I'm not taking it anywhere, but those are just some ideas that came up for me to ponder, I guess, later. Should we go on to our card? I'm looking at the time, and we were way ahead of schedule at one point, but we've slowed down. This has been a really good discussion. So I'm, even though we've got a small group today, I'm really happy that everybody's participating so much.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's go on and we'll focus on Austin's imagery. String of prayer beads and our Seven of Pentacles. Yeah.
And I wanted to point out, I was trying to wait for the right time to bring it up, but remind people that although the Golden Dawn titled this "A Lord of Success Unfulfilled," Crowley titles it "Failure," and the result is drastically different interpretations of this card in different decks. I bring this particular card up when I talk about how cards can look so different in different decks. And this is a really good one to compare, because the idea of failure is that those vines are not going to thrive at all, that they will die, that it's a lost cause already. And the Lord of Success Unfulfilled, I always call it, my personal take on it, is the Lord of Success not yet fulfilled. And I think that to me is more of the concept of, you're kind of at the point where you've done everything that you can do, but something could still go wrong, but he is still trying to be attentive and watch over his crops as they come into ripeness. But at the same time, you also don't want them, there are external things that could happen, but also if he doesn't take action at the right time, those could get too ripe and then they'd wither on the vine and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a very delicate balance to me in this card.
Yeah, that subject came up in our previous my group that when we were talking about Taurus. We looked at all the cards that were related to it, and including the minors. And somebody had mentioned, when we got to the seven, that now it's a case, like it is that split, where you think, well, on the one hand, maybe this person is reflecting upon the failure of the crops, but he's also, there's that element where you can look at it in terms of like, well, he's practicing patience. And that's, again, I guess that's Saturnian influence of you have to respect the laws of time and the way nature needs to be able to, go about its own business in order for this to work, as well as providing your own efforts. And it's more of a case of, well, there is that hopeful aspect that this is all going to work if I do, if I practice the patience.
Yeah, I definitely like patience for this card. It's a keyword I also use quite a bit. I think the thing that's coming to mind for me is I always thought, now these look like gourd leaves here. Some people do refer to them as grapevines. Um, but I always think of these as gourds. But I think either way, it seems to me there's a sequence in how plants develop and certain times of year. Now, this is not going to represent a Taurian time period. This is going to be more of a fall time period. But certain types of year, the energy is all going to the root of the plant, and then it's going to the growth and to the stems and the leaves, and then the energy shifts again into the fruit. And I think one of the confusing things in this card, particularly in the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, is that the leaves do look like they're starting to droop and get maybe a little brown and maybe starting to wilt. But I think I'm not a gardener and I have never raised gourds or grapes. But I think that is normal for the leaves to droop as the fruit gets ripe. Because most of the energy is going entirely into the fruit. And so, and that just brings to mind, it's like, well, if you wanted leaves for something, it's too late to harvest those leaves. Their time has passed. But if you wanted the fruit, now is the right time to get that. And they say, for instance, with roses, you have to uh, cut off the dead flowers before they turn into the rose hips, the seed pods, so that again the energy doesn't go from the plant into creating those seed pods, but returns back into the plant and cycling through for the next year. So this idea of what is the right time to do this, I think becomes really strong for me with this card. And what are you too late for, and what still lies ahead? Yeah, Monica.
So for me, and again, I think this is more my personal biases when I'm looking at these two cards. A huge part of the Seven of Coins to me is that you've put in the work. You've done your job, you've put the effort in. And when I'm looking at Coppock's prayer beads, again, perhaps if they had been Buddhist beads or seeds from the Bodhi tree or something like that, I'd think of it differently. But all I can think of in my head is that terrible phrase, let go and let God, which absolves you of any effort. And so all I'm seeing when I look at this is that stark contrast, and it's not what I want to see, but it's just what's screaming out at me.
Yeah, I agree. There's something it makes me kind of see the pentacles in the card as beads on the string. And so, yeah, I'm having trouble reconciling these. I'm trying to go back to our elephant men and their calf and dog and horse and those things and seeing if I get anything. The one thing that's coming to mind is I used to teach a class on making malas. I do like working with prayer beads. And one of the things, you don't hold them like they're being held in the picture. But one of the things, you hold them in one hand and you touch each bead as you say the mantra, and then you move it to the next bead. And so what's really interesting is this necessity to like be in contact, in physical contact with each individual bead on the string as you cycle through and you're counting your prayers. And the Hal and I started doing a puzzle Thursday, and the very first thing you do, you dump all like 1,000 pieces onto a table, and the very first thing you have to do is spread them all out, turn them all right side up, and start looking for like the edge pieces and things like that. And so I immediately became very stressed because I was just like I can't just sit back and study this. The first thing I have to do is touch every piece as I organize this. And it was a little overwhelming for some reason. But I think that maybe that touch thing might go into the Taurian earthy element, and to plant these seeds and to tend to the vines and to um, care for the fruit as it develops, and then to harvest the fruit. Yeah, you have to be in physical contact with each little thing at each step of the way. Over in the comments we have mindfulness, yeah, just held just I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correctly. Just held like that with my personal bias. I definitely miss that part of it. The touch and mindfulness aspect is definitely easier to reconcile. The beads being held like that. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, no, and I think that's really interesting because you're doing the same thing I was doing. It's like I've got my own personal, like I see it this way, but maybe I should be looking at it another way. And there's a lot of contrast that I'm coming up with in this one for some reason. And yeah, I don't know if it's what it is going on first in particular here, but yeah, trying to find ways, I guess, finding ways to approach this stuff that brings about an understanding and integration of contrasts, a reconciliation. Didn't you say somebody said it wasn't it was redemption and oh man, I forgot it again. When we were looking at the three at the very, very beginning.
It
And
was redemption and forgiveness for me. This arc has like a very personal kind of story to it, this little segment. So yeah, reconciliation I think is part of that forgiveness and redemption piece.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's like we had to go through that very process ourselves with these three decans. Will you tell us? I know I'm sure we got this on the recording the first time around, but will you tell us again your three? Because I think you had the two different versions of your arc of three.
Oh, I was just saying, like, to me, the 5, 6, 7, it's very much to me a personal journey of that forgiveness and redemption, and sort of again a personal journey to me of that doing that work, that inner forgiveness, and sort of getting to a better place. I'm not articulating that super well, but it is just a 3-card segment that's always just really called out to me in a very specific way.
Okay, cool. Are we done, John? I
think
feel like we
so.
could keep going because we're
Oh
having
yeah, we
really
could
good talks.
we always feel like we can keep going indefinitely, I think.
So
Okay.
we've definitely put in our 2 hours, and we probably should let people leave.
Okay. Great. Very good conversation, good comments from everybody. I thought that was very good, very eye-opening.
Yeah, it was for me as well.
Okay, I guess we can wrap up then. Thanks for both of you for doing it. Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, thanks guys, and thanks for great participation. I really appreciate that. And I definitely felt like I got a lot out of this today. Hopefully you guys did too.